We're going to continue our discussion about respiration. Remember, we said that cellular respiration happens in several phases. All of respiration starts with glycolysis, which happens in the cytoplasm and is anaerobic. And then depending on whether or not you have oxygen present, if you do, you're going to carry out aerobic respiration. So we're going to talk about aerobic respiration today, assuming we have oxygen present. So the definition is the process of converting energy from organic compounds into ATP in the presence of oxygen. So there's our key, we have to have oxygen present. Aerobic respiration happens in 3 stages. Now, remember the glycolysis phase is an anaerobic phase, but it has to start with glycolysis, so it's still part of it. So glycolysis, step 1, happens in the cytoplasm, and then we continue our journey through the cell and we move from the cytoplasm into the mitochondria with the next 2 phases, the Krebs cycle and something called the electron transport chain. So if you look at the mitochondria has this inner membrane, which some people call it the cristae, and then we have the matrix or fluid portion, and then there's an outer membrane. And that's one of the reasons why more complex organisms carry out aerobic respiration, because very simplified, remember prokaryotic organisms don't have membrane-bound organelles. And we see that the mitochondria has a membrane, an inner and an outer membrane. So if we move on, we've already talked about glycolysis. So now step 2, if we have oxygen present, we're going to move from the cytoplasm into the mitochondria to carry out something called the Krebs cycle. So if you remember, we had pyruvic acid, some people call it pyruvate, from glycolysis. And remember, we made 2 of them because they're 3-carbon compounds. What's going to happen is they're going to get converted into another 3-carbon compound called acetyl-CoA. And remember, there's going to be 2 of them. And in this cycle, which is going to turn 2 times for every glucose molecules, because remember pyruvic acid, we made 2 of them because there are only 3 carbons, we're going to attach hydrogens to NAD plus to make NADH. We're going to attach some hydrogens to FAD to make FADH2. These are our electron carriers. They're going to move on to the next cycle, the next phase or stage. Those are going to help us to create our energy. During the Krebs cycle, we do make 2 ATP. Remember, glycolysis also gained 2 ATP as well. That's just not a lot of energy still. So there's got to be more later on. This is one of the key things for you to remember is that during this phase, this is where we release carbon dioxide. What's happening during the Krebs cycle is we're rearranging bonds. And as we're rearranging the bonds, we're taking some hydrogens off in order to create new molecules. And along the way, we release a little bit of carbon dioxide. And keep in mind that this cycle turns or runs 2 times for every glucose because pyruvic acid is only a 3-carbon compound. And we made 2 of those during glycolysis. So then what happens after the Krebs cycle? Well, after the Krebs cycle, we move on into the membrane of the mitochondria and we carry out something called the electron transport chain, or ETC. We don't like to write it out very often. Most people just abbreviate it ETC. Sometimes it's called oxidative phosphorylation, and the reason why is oxidative means that you've lost electrons, and what we're going to do is we're going to take the electrons or the hydrogens off of our carriers, and we're going to phosphorylate ATP, and that just means we're going to attach the P, the high energy P, to it to make ATP. So what happens during the electron transport chain? Well, we said it happens on the mitochondrial membrane, and then we're going to take NADH and FADH2, and they're going to lose their hydrogens to create a hydrogen gradient. So there's going to be a difference. There's going to be pluses on one side of the membrane and electrons on the other membrane. The electrons get transferred around. Along the way, this is where our oxygen comes into play. This is the step where it's needed because oxygen is the final acceptor of those electrons in this little cascade or waterfall of reactions. Well, if I combine oxygen and hydrogens in the right quantities, I'm going to make water. And this is why water gets made during cellular respiration. And then towards the end, we have something called ATP synthase. Do you remember what that would be? You're right, the ASE tells us it's going to be an enzyme. That's going to be used in order to take all those hydrogens and electrons floating around to make about 32 ATP. Now, it's not exact. Sometimes it's a little more. 32 is on the kind of conservative side. So in the end, for this phase alone, we're going to gain 32 ATP. Much better than the 2 ATP we got from the Krebs cycle and the 2 ATP we gained from glycolysis. This is where our energy production is. So let's look at a little bit of a summary for aerobic respiration. So remember, aerobic respiration happens in 3 phases. We start off with glycolysis. We're taking glucose and turning it into 2-pyruvate or 2-pyruvic acid, and we're going to gain 2 ATP. Now remember, we made 4 ATP, but we had to use 2, so we've only gained 2 ATP here, and this is also happening in the cytoplasm. That pyruvate or pyruvic acid, the 2 of them, are going to move into the mitochondria then when oxygen is present, and they're going to carry out the Krebs cycle. Now remember, the Krebs cycle has to happen twice. For every pyruvic acid molecule, it's going to turn 1 time. So for glucose, it's going to turn twice. During the Krebs cycle, we've released some carbon dioxide into the atmosphere, and we've gained 2 ATP. Our hydrogen carriers are going to move on to stage 3, the electron transport chain. Our oxygen is going to come in and combine with the hydrogens to make water, and this is our moneymaker, 32 ATP approximately, give or take a few, gained. So overall, for our entire aerobic respiration, from beginning with glycolysis to the end with Krebs cycle and electron transport chain, we gain a minimum of 36 ATP. That is much more efficient at getting all of the energy out of glucose compared to an anaerobic organism that only can gain 2 ATP for every glucose. This is why multicellular organisms can carry out such complicated life processes and become such large complex organisms, because they're really pretty much masters at gaining and converting the energy so efficiently from their foods.